What's the legend?
Well,
People say that about me all the time. They say, you're a legend.
Does this studio make him a real one?
When the lights dim and the screen flickers to life, few names carry the gravity and artistic reverence of Martin Scorsese. His films have challenged the boundaries of narrative, reinvented genres, and introduced generations to unforgettable characters. But beyond the silver screen, behind every groundbreaking scene and award-winning performance, lies a complex network of creative decisions, some that flourish and others that fracture. The collaborative spirit between directors and actors is often a delicate dance. In Scorsese's case, that relationship has typically been one of mutual respect and elevation. Consider his iconic partnership with Robert De Niro, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Joe Pesci. Yet, even in a career with illustrations as his, not every working relationship has ended in harmony. Today's episode dives into 5 actors whose names have surfaced in various corners of the industry, not for their brilliance in a Scorsese film, but because of tensions, missed opportunities, or complete misalignment with his artistic vision. Let's explore what really happened behind the curtain. Mark Wahlberg's performance in The Departed earned widespread acclaim. His portrayal of Sergeant Sean Digna brought a brash, explosive energy that stood out amid a stacked cast. It was a role that earned him an Oscar nominations, reaffirming his position as a powerful screen presence. But the story behind the scenes tells a different tale, one that suggests the explosive tension on screen wasn't all part of the script. Wahlberg's time on The Departed marked his first and only collaboration with Martin Scorsese. That might seem surprising, especially considering the film's success and Wahlberg's growing clout in Hollywood at the time. Yet, despite the accolades, he never reappeared in Scorsese's cinematic orbit. The absence speaks louder than any statement. While many actors became recurring players in the director's body of work, Wahlberg quietly slipped out of the frame. Insiders close to the project have suggested that Wahlberg's Princess didn't always sync with Scorsese's meticulous, details-driven approach. Wahlberg is known for a raw, instinctual acting style. It works brilliantly when channeled, but on a set directed by someone who thrives on control and layered subtext, it can create friction. Reports indicate that while there were no overt confrontations, the mood on set was far from seamless. The rhythm between director and actor never truly aligned. The lack of future collaboration feels intentional rather than circumstantial. After The Departed, Scorsese went on to create some of the most celebrated films of his career. He worked with familiar names and new faces, yet Wahlberg was never among them. No cameo, no supporting role, not even a whisper of being attached to future projects. In an industry where repeat collaborations are often the mark of mutual respect and ease of workflow, the silence speaks volumes. Wahlberg's exclusion appears less like a snub and more like a quiet decision, an artistic parting of ways. It wasn't scandalous. It didn't erupt into public headlines. But the finality of it is clear. For all the applause and recognition that came with Dignam, the performance stands alone in Scorsese's filmography, never followed by a second act. Years earlier, another actor found himself on the opposite end of a Scorsese story, not through a clash of styles, but through a missed opportunity that would quietly shape the rest of his career in relation to the director. Dustin Hoffman, already established as a major name in the industry, was approached for the lead role in Taxi Driver. At the time, Hoffman had the kind of cultural weight that studios loved to see headlining a film. Scorsese was still climbing, still earning trust from the system. The match seemed logical on paper, but logic isn't always enough. Hoffman has spoken in various interviews over the years about his decision to pass on the film. He didn't connect with the script and wasn't convinced by the pitch he received from Scorsese. The script was unconventional and dark, an introspective descent into psychological isolation. It didn't conform to the trends of the time, and Scorsese, though talented, hadn't yet built the legacy that now carries his name. In that moment, Hoffman exercised what any actor might consider a reasonable judgment call. He moved on, and Taxi Driver moved forward without him. Robert De Niro stepped in, and the film became a milestone in American cinema. It defined a tone, a visual language, and a cultural mood that would influence films for decades. For Scorsese, it solidified his voice as a director. For Hoffman, it became a defining what-if. What makes this notable is not the rejection itself. Actors pass on roles all the time. But in Scorsese's world, a decision made at the wrong moment, particularly one that suggests hesitation about the director's vision, can linger. Despite Hoffman's continued success and the respect he garnered within the industry, he was never brought into Scorsese's later projects. There was no public falling out, no dramatic distance, just an enduring absence. Scorsese would go on to work with performers from every corner of the acting spectrum, including those who were initially outside his inner circle. But Hoffman was never among them. The pattern here isn't about punishment. It's about alignment. Scorsese appears to value not just talent, but belief, an instinctual trust in the story being told. Those who join his projects often do so with total commitment, embracing the emotional and psychological demands he places on his actors. It's not simply about hitting marks or delivering lines. It's about diving deep into the story's marrow, unafraid of what might be found there. Both Wahlberg and Hoffman are actors with immense range and credibility. Their careers are filled with defining roles and memorable performances. But in the Scorsese landscape, they are distant figures, each connected by a brief intersection that never turned into something more. The takeaway isn't just about missed chances or clashing energies. It's about how certain directors build a creative ecosystem. In Scorsese's case, it's a world built not only on performance, but on cohesion, on the unspoken understanding between director and actor. When that connection falters or fails to spark, it often doesn't get a second chance. These stories underscore a subtler truth of filmmaking. Success doesn't guarantee invitation. Critical acclaim doesn't ensure repeat collaboration. Sometimes, the dynamics behind the camera hold more weight than what we see on screen. Wahlberg's explosive presence in The Departed and Hoffman's near casting in Taxi Driver are both reminders of how fragile and finite those creative links can be. Not every strong performance leads to a lasting partnership. In Scorsese's universe, the connection must be more than professional. It must be deeply, artistically, symbiotic. And when it isn't, the silence that follows can be more telling than any public explanation. In the world of casting, few decisions carry as much long-term impact as those made by a director like Martin Scorsese. Every choice is deliberate, and when a name as prominent as Harrison Ford enters the conversation, it's not something taken lightly. For Cape Fear in 1991, Scorsese was building a psychological battlefield. The role of Sam Bowden required restraint and quiet moral conflict, a man haunted not only by an external threat, but by the erosion of his own certainty. Harrison Ford was on the shortlist for that very role. What followed wasn't an argument or an impasse, but rather a breakdown of creative symmetry. Ford, rather than accepting the position of the embattled protagonist, expressed a desire to explore the role of Max Cady, the antagonist, a deeply disturbed figure who lingers over the film like a storm. It was already known that Robert De Niro had been tapped for the role. De Niro had not only worked closely with Scorsese for decades, but had also committed himself fully to the preparation for Cady, including physical transformation and intensive research. Scorsese, who operates with precise intentions and often crafts roles with specific actors in mind, couldn't shift the dynamic. Ford's suggestion, while intriguing, didn't align with the existing foundation of the film. De Niro as Cady was a decision already set in motion both creatively and practically. The offer to Ford could not be restructured to fit his interest, and with neither party willing to shift positions, the potential collaboration faded quietly. The result was more than just a missed opportunity. Ford and Scorsese never found another project to align on after that. There were no public disputes, no professional criticisms exchanged, but the distance remained. It wasn't about ego or reputation. It was about vision and interpretation. In Scorsese's environment, once that harmony is disturbed, it's rarely revisited. Not because of resentment, but because the process moves forward. Momentum is everything in his filmmaking journey. Harrison Ford went on to lead numerous successful projects, many of which cemented his place among the most bankable stars of his era. Yet, his absence from Scorsese's filmography remains a curious footnote. It serves as a reminder of how one moment of artistic divergence can set the course for decades of separation. The door was opened. A conversation began. But without that central alignment, it simply didn't continue. Another case of brief contact and long-term silence came with one of the most talked-about figures in popular culture. In the development stages of Goodfellas, Scorsese faced a critical casting decision for the character of Karen Hill, the wife of Henry Hill, whose perspective adds a crucial emotional and psychological layer to the narrative. The actress needed to carry not just scenes, but shifts in tone, loyalty, and internal conflict. The role eventually went to Lorraine Bracco, whose performance brought a grounding realism to the fast-paced, volatile world depicted in the film. Before Bracco was selected, there was industry speculation that Madonna was being considered. At the time, she was a cultural phenomenon, seeking to expand her artistic range beyond music and into serious cinema. Her interest in the role was not seen as a gimmick. She was investing in film work, taking acting seriously, and pushing to be taken seriously in return. Yet, when it came time for a final decision, Scorsese passed. Those familiar with the casting process have suggested that while Madonna had charisma and presence, Scorsese questioned whether she could carry the emotional gravity required for Karen. The film hinges on Karen's slow realization of the life she's been drawn into. It required an actor capable of subtle shifts and of psychological detail that would neither exaggerate nor flatten the inner turmoil. Scorsese's decision wasn't a critique of Madonna's popularity or even her talent in general. It was a commitment to a certain kind of authenticity. Goodfellas is not a film that leaves space for uncertain footing. Every casting choice had to support the film's tonal consistency and the realism in its world-building. Madonna's star power was undeniable, but in this context, it wasn't the right match. Since that casting decision, Madonna has never worked with Scorsese on any project, despite her ongoing presence in the entertainment world. She has continued to take on roles, even directing and producing her own work. But within the circle of Scorsese collaborators, she remained on the outside. There was no fallout, no public reaction, but also no return invitation. What both cases make clear is that Scorsese's choices are shaped not by industry expectations, but by an unyielding adherence to his own narrative instinct. Whether dealing with icons from the film world like Ford or crossover talents like Madonna, he resists external influence when it comes to the integrity of his films. The decision to walk away is not made lightly, but it is made decisively. These casting crossroads reflect something deeper than mere preference. They highlight the way Scorsese builds his films from the inside out. Performance to him is not simply about delivering lines convincingly. It's about fitting into the emotional architecture of the story. When an actor's presence, however powerful, disrupts that structure, the collaboration doesn't happen. There's a pattern that reveals itself over time. Once Scorsese passes on a performer or loses alignment during pre-production, he rarely circles back. Some directors are more fluid, willing to revisit missed chances or reevaluate working relationships years later. Scorsese, however, appears to chart a more linear path. When creative energy doesn't synchronize in the early stages, the project moves on, and so does he. What emerges from these stories is not the idea of exclusion, but the principle of compatibility. Ford and Madonna were not dismissed. They were considered, evaluated, and ultimately set aside because the match wasn't right in that moment. That moment, in Scorsese's framework, is everything. There is no artificial inclusion. No role is shaped to accommodate a name. Each part is an extension of the story's core. The absence of these major figures in Scorsese's filmography may surprise audiences who see casting as a negotiation of star power. But in his world, there is no space for compromise when it comes to narrative cohesion. The choices that don't happen are just as revealing as the ones that do. Mickey Rourke's journey through the film industry has always been marked by extremes. He entered with a quiet intensity, showing early promise in roles that hinted at something raw and unfiltered beneath the surface. Directors and critics recognized his potential, yet as his career progressed, The volatility surrounding his personal life and professional demeanor became increasingly difficult to separate from the performances themselves. Throughout the years, Martin Scorsese has worked with actors who carry intensity, contradiction, and emotional depth. Yet, when it came to Rourke, the collaboration never materialized. According to those familiar with various casting discussions, Rourke's name came up more than once during the development phases of several Scorsese projects. His screen presence was undeniable, but concerns consistently outweighed potential. Scorsese's sets are known for demanding structure. The narrative arcs he builds rely heavily on trust between director and actor, not only in terms of discipline, but also in maintaining momentum and cohesion within the ensemble. Rourke's history of being unpredictable, both on and off set, introduced too many variables into that process. Even at the height of his career revival, during a period when many directors were reconsidering him for major roles, Scorsese remained firm in his distance. What stands out is the lack of public tension between the two. There were no interviews where Scorsese commented on the absence, no industry clashes that made headlines. Yet Rourke has occasionally alluded to being passed over, suggesting that some directors never gave him a fair chance even during his most disciplined periods. The frustration was evident, but it remained a quiet undercurrent, rather than a loud confrontation. The choice to avoid working with Rourke seems rooted in more than just personal preference. It points to a philosophy Scorsese has carried throughout his career. Each actor must support the film as a whole, not disrupt its rhythm. Even the most powerful performance means little if it doesn't fit into the broader emotional architecture of the story. In that light, Rourke's chaotic reputation became more than an external issue. It was a risk to the internal harmony of a production. It is not a question of talent. Rourke has delivered performances that are deeply affecting and fully realized. But for Scorsese, the process is just as important as the outcome. He creates environments where trust allows exploration, not disruption. In that context, Rourke's inclusion could have introduced a level of instability that no amount of screen presence could justify. The absence of a collaboration speaks to a deeper truth about the way Scorsese works. His casting decisions reflect a long-term vision, one that values reliability and narrative focus above all. And when an actor's reputation signals unpredictability, even brilliance can be left behind. Before we wrap up, it's important to take a step back and recognize what these stories really represent. Martin Scorsese is not a man driven by grudges or celebrity ego. His choices, whether in casting, storytelling, or collaboration, are rooted in a deeply held respect for the art of cinema. The absence of certain actors in his body of work isn't always a sign of personal conflict. Often, it reflects a careful, sometimes even painful, process of ensuring that every element in his films serves the narrative, not the name attached to it. The relationships that didn't evolve, the actors never invited back, or the stars who passed on now iconic roles. These are the quiet moments that shape cinematic history just as much as award speeches or box office numbers. If you found this exploration of Scorsese's creative decision-making insightful, consider supporting the channel by liking the video. Share your thoughts in the comments. Was there an actor you were surprised to hear didn't work with him again? Or perhaps someone you think should have? And most importantly, subscribe. This channel is dedicated to uncovering the untold stories behind the movies that shape culture, influence generations, and reveal just how complex great filmmaking truly is. Thank you for watching. We'll be back soon with more.